gamers, gals, non-binary pals. New little drama popping up. Ooh boy, I sure love hopping on Twitter and seeing my favorite Team APS take on the timeline. What if this person just wants to play a 6am deck, for instance? They just got new support, but where do you play it? It's outclassed by Malice and yugioh, and also you can't play these new cards in Edison format. How about Generator, Vanquishal, Nouvelle? And this sort of sparked the discussion on what do we do about cards that are good, but not so good they're gonna be meta relevant, you know? Like, one of the big things that you kind of notice about TCG support is that a lot of the support for archetypes, for the most part, will be really, really good. Like, think about like Legendary Lord Xian, which is a fucking Stratos, or Enishi, which is like a Giga Bounce, you know what I mean? But for the most part, a lot of TCG support, or OCG, or blah 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 support, for the most part, is kind of in this really weird spot of these cards are very, very, very good for like this archetype, but just not good overall. Like, it's just not going to be good enough to make it meta. Like, you guys remember when we got like the Generator support? Like, Generator got 2 ways of support with like Lopter and then like Garda, and now we have like Vala as well as like Leviathan. But a lot of cards do get printed in the sense where like, yeah, super duper cool deck, super fun. This deck just unfortunately still sucks. I'm so happy to see Paul talking this. Nouvelle, 6am, Battling Boxers, a whole host of unique decks with interesting game plans that will never see play unless the benevolent card designer gods give them busted legacy support. Why print them if there's nowhere to play them? Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of a Stevie hot take. I think these just fundamentally are busted cards. Like, you're gonna tell me you're gonna read Xian, which is a negate. It's just an unconditional negate for a monster effect. That's not even once per turn. That's also a Stratos. You're gonna tell me that this card is bad. No, the support is not bad. It's the cards within the archetype that are bad. The main issue when it comes to like printing cards that just say like, oh, when you do this card, just special this card and then make like $1 million bajillion dollars, is that these sort of cards oftentimes break the game. The easiest example I could give, Neo Space Connector. This card is like the fucking Hitler of like dog shit warrior piles. Everyone remembers where like Neo Space Connector summon Aqua Dolphin. You just insta lose. Like, everyone remembers like a Neo-Spacian Connector. If you don't Ash Blossom this, you're getting it ripped out of your hand. If you don't Effect Veil Order this, you're getting ripped out of your hand. And if your opponent like special Junk Speeder or like led with any Warrior Extender, you just insta-lost anyways. Because even if you Ash the Connector, they just make Isolde and then FTK you because they go like Armageddon Knight, summon Gumblar. Like, this sort of card design is something that Konami, for the most part, wants to move away from. It's not very, you know, healthy card design. So that's why a lot of cards that we're seeing now are more pointed towards the extra deck, or more kind of seen as extenders. Again, when we're talking about the 6 Samurai support, think of like Xian, who is an extra deck payoff. When we're looking at the other guys, think of like Anarchist Monk, who is like an extender, and the other guy, who's mainly an extender, like Tactical Trainer. These cards are not designed to be like one card hyper starter, like just fuck your wife and call me silly. Because the last time we got something like this, we had Double Helix, which was not okay. I missed this deck so much. This deck was so sick, but oh my god, it was so cancer at times. One of the big problems when it comes to like making hyper overtuned card design is that at a point, decks become uninteractable. Think of like the yugioh combo, for example. The reason why like these cards are like so broken, like you just can't interact with everything. Think of like Bonfire. You Ash that, sure. We go, okay, we can't do our feats with plays. We go X'd. This gets negated. Okay, sure, that gets impermed. We go Sword. That gets impermed. We go into like, what, Duo Drive? You're gonna tell me you have like the 4th imperm? Like, you might. Or what if I just go like Detonator Pass? I go Detonator, like equip the Aggregator, set 2 cards, or I have like 2 hand traps. Good luck, buddy. You can't do shit. This is the sort of card design that makes decks fundamentally broken, and people will complain about it if that sort of card design ever comes out. Like people are like, oh wow, I want like 6 Sam to get support. Do you remember what 6 Sam did? You do not want 6 Sam to be meta playable. I feel like it's very good. It's just other decks that either have a better gimmick or just power creep since 6 Sam are a bit old. Yeah, like unfortunately, 6 Sam is a deck that's fundamentally not designed to have a 1-card starter. Because if the card did have a 1-card starter, like, it would be the greatest fucking combo deck of all time. Because you just like normal summon the guy, and then it just does the full 6 Sam combo while setting up a negate for you, you know what I mean? Such a crucial conversation, super happy to see people breaching it. There's so many interesting, awesome cards for engaging, well-designed decks that do not and cannot go everywhere, even at a local level. And yet they keep printing them. Surely there's a way we could add value. Well, unfortunately, these are archetypes that are not really designed to be the main product sellers. Because again, Konami does print new archetypes in order to sell the product and whatever. Like, when was the last time you've seen legacy support be like rarity gate kept? Like, just think about it. I don't think I've ever seen it like a single time outside of like maybe Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer. You know what I mean? Like, that was less because, you know, it was more like Destiny Hero support. It was more just like a fuck it. Here's a boss monster. Go Verte Anaconda. Hit the gritty. It's something we encounter with almost every TMT. Ryuge, Sark, Battle Lost, Metalmorph, Sharks, Dolce. Killer decks with main set support. I would not call Ryuge killer. But built from the ground up to get 4 videos by exactly me, Exordio, Lithium Mucine, and then be instantly forgotten. Like, remember Kubiko? World premiere trap monster as part of an English pile that's way more available thanks to Rabbit. Think there'd be pressure for something like this to matter, but nope, just a one-off archetype, too weak, then lost. It's so weird to see huge parts of the Yu-Gi-Oh production model involve inventing, designing, printing, and then distributing cards intended to see zero play in the single format people play, with no intention to create some sort of supplemental format where they would. Now, this is gonna come as a little bit of a kind of condescending opinion, but these cards are not meant for you. These cards are meant for shitty meme deck builders. Okay, now let me explain. My friend Zeke is kind of a freak. To call him a deck builder is kind of like calling Oppenheimer a fan of Legos. Zeke will make the craziest fucking brews imaginable. He will make the most dog shit piles of just pure ass just out into the world. He will play like 60 card Danger Turbo. He will play Infernity Fiendsmith. He will play... I don't even know what... Is this Tenpai Dragoonity Dragon Rulers? That's wild. But these cards, mostly, are not for just hyper competitive play. There exist people who do in fact, lo behold, they play this game for fun. Now, most of these cards take up the common and super rare and maybe a few ultra rare slots here and there. So they're not like stepping on people's toes, you know what I mean? These cards are not meant for just mass public play in the sense of like Fiendsmith or Ryzeal or Malice or like whatever fucking meta deck exists at the time. Like, these cards exist mainly just for, you know, wild deck builders to like get creative. They want to have fun at the local level. These cards are designed for locals players who want to have heart and fucking go 2-2 at a locals and just make people think, what the fuck is happening? The number one best example I could give of this is like simultaneous equation cannon, where like this card is such a fucking headache, but resolving this is like the biggest high you could ever get. You know what I mean? Isn't the pack filler also there to make good cards look better? I mean, true, in the sense where like just shifting through like 50 garbage commons and like getting that one secret rare makes like the secret rare like way more poggers. But I do understand 100% the player sentiment of like, yeah, we got a bunch of like cool support. We got like Kubiko for trap monsters. We got Madolche support. We got like Drytron support. We got like Shark support. We got Battle Lost support. We got like 5 bajillion super duper cool cards that were released within the past couple years for like archetypes that are like so close to being meta, but just aren't because of like fundamental issues. And I understand that it's like frustrating for these decks to be like technically playable, but just suffer from massive fundamental issues. But that's okay, because again, these cards are not meant to be meta. These are cards designed to make a current deck more viable. in the sense where like a deck no longer loses to like one interruption. It now has way more extenders. Think of like if Sharks didn't like hard open a Bish Shark, that shit lost to like Imperm on Buzzsaw Shark. If they didn't open like Silent Angler or whatever, you know what I mean? These are decks that are designed to be for casual play and for people to have fun with. Not every deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs to be designed with competitive integrity in mind. It would be nice if it could. It would be nice if we had like 50 super viable decks that all had, you know, their own unique strengths and weaknesses. But unfortunately, Konami's not like that. They're gonna release 1 to 3 decks with very, very massive strengths and like very minute weaknesses that barely even matter in the long run, you know what I mean? It's just an unfortunate reality that we live in, where again the game is not balanced based on health but for profit margins. Again, if you need an example, look at any ban list ever. But what I will say is that if you want to have fun at locals and you're like, oh wow, I'm so sad about having to play Fiends with Frysio every format, go to locals, load up a little Drytron every now and then. I don't know, maybe play a little like Dragoonity Tenpai. Maybe play like a little I don't know. What's a garbage deck I have in here? Yeah, play a little Tellarknight, you know? Just, why not? What about like Primite Phantasm Spiral? That's a deck. Would be really great to see a Smogon type approach to address this. Give us defined brackets. Ubers as banned decks, those who want to play Tier versus Pepe. OU as top decks and OU as a top decks or so. And the rest fall into place where there are overpowered or underpowered decks as they shift brackets. Kuchin tried, but IMO there's nowhere near enough data nor form players to make these determinations. Now the Smogon model is not 100% congruent to be able to used in Yu-Gi-Oh! In the sense where Smogon, or like Pokemon usage stats, are way more clearly defined and able to draw conclusions upon rather than Yu-Gi-Oh! Stats. Let's look at like Calyrex. Calyrex is like a Pokemon who, like, you look at the base stat total, you look at the moves, and you're like, okay, yeah, this Pokemon has a very clearly defined purpose, is beating every single other Pokemon that fulfills this niche. We're gonna bump it up to Ubers or anything goes or whatever. It's very easy to draw that sort of conclusion. Or you could look at something like Clefable and be like, this is like a Pokemon which, although its stats are kind of like shitty, it has a ton of flexibility and a very solid typing that a lot of other Pokemon realistically just can't really compete with in terms of flexibility and adaptability. So this Pokemon, based on its usage stats and potential for play level, we're going to put it at OU. I'm not actually sure it's still OU, but you guys get the idea. Now, when you look at a card like Destructive Daruma Karma Cannon, how would you rate that in comparison to Book of Eclipse? Are you going to say one is better than the other? Are you going to go by pure usage stats? You can't really, because Book of Eclipse might see only massive upticks of play when like Sprite or Fiends of Frysio are within the meta. Whereas something like Daruma Karma Cannon is only going to be meta playable when people are playing Labyrinth, and Labyrinth is a meta deck. So it's impossible to like draw direct correlations with each other in the same way you kind of can with Pokemon, where again, all the Pokemon are available and you're able to be like, yeah, like Calyrex during this format is going to be super duper good. Azelf is not going to be very, very good right now. Mew is not going to be amazing right now. Ninjask is Ninjask. Like, these Pokemon have very clearly defined roles and playstyles, at least at the competitive level, that make them far more distinct and less nuanced relative to like staples or archetypes. Like again, look at all the OU Pokemon. A Lolamola, a water tank, Clodsire, a poison ground tank. We've got Diancie, like a rock fairy tank. We got like Iron Treads, which is, you know, like an offensive, bruiser. Landorus Therian, it's Landorus Therian. We have a lot of these Pokemon which have very specific roles that don't impede upon each other. But in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's going to be a lot of muddied water in regards to what does one deck do better than the other? Like, what really is the difference between like Centurion and White Forest? They're just both synchro piles that try and lock your opponent out of the game by interacting on their turn. It's like, oh, okay, so like, which one's better? Well, it's kind of dependent on the context of the metagame, and it kind of does depend on like how much a card is resourced in your hand, and like Centurion's better with hand traps, and like White Force is better with board breakers, blah 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 blah. Like, there's way too much nuance in order to kind of like derive a direct tiering system. Additionally, I don't want to say this, but this is an issue of Smogon too, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Players and their definition of what's fair and viable kind of vary extremely easily. Like, if you want to talk about decks that like lose to Ash Blossom, it's like, sure, Fiendsmith is a deck that loses to Ash Blossom. This is an engine that like loses to Ash Blossom. What else loses to the Ash Blossom? Like Ryzeal, if you ash their ice and they have no more starters or extenders, that's a deck that loses to Ryzeal. You know what isn't a deck that loses to Ash Blossom? Labyrinth. Yep. They have monsters and more back row. They can stall me out. And when in like reality it's like the complete opposite, because these decks just do so many more different things that trying to quantify what a deck can do in certain circumstances is so variable compared to like Pokemon. You know what I mean? Like, again, if we want to use like the Pokemon example of like comparing what one Pokemon can do compared to another, let's look at like Dragapult. It's like offensive, able to like pierce through defenses, able to protect its stats, just an offensive monster with great stats in attack and speed. Where if we try and look at maybe like an Argue attacker, let's think of like Arcanine Hisuian. Like, sure, it's got a pretty good defensive / supportive ability in Intimidate. I mean, it's like literally the best one, but we didn't talk about that. It also has like Rockhead for able to deal like a ton of damage, but it's way less flexible in what it's able to do, in the sense where it's far slower, its attack stat isn't that high, its typing is far worse relative to Dragapult. Dragapult has way more sets. It's got Dragon Dance plus Substitute. It's got great coverage. And Arcanine's like, here's Flame Charge. Here's Close Combat. Here's Rocket. Actually, that's pretty good. It's pretty good coverage, actually. Oh my god, it's got Wild Charge too. Oh my god, this Pokemon is the fucking GOAT. But you can kind of tell where Arcanine's kind of just picking 4 coverage moves, like 4 of the best coverage moves, because its playstyle is extremely limited into I am just going to hit my opponent very hard. Where Dragapult can be like, you can play him supportive like Disable or Thunder Wave and Will-O-Wisp. You could play him as like a hit and runner with like Choice Scarf and U-Turn. You could play him as, you know, this offensive like Dragon Dancer, like Dragon Dance and like Dragon Darts and like 5 bajillion other sets. And in Yu-Gi-Oh, you can't really make that distinction super great. Can you talk about why it isn't optimal to have every deck they make be meta playable? Probably like the biggest reason, outside of like profit reasons, is mainly just these. One of the biggest reasons is just too many decks within a metagame makes it a very frustrating experience for new players to play the game. It's kind of like League of Legends in a weird sense, where you will look at like the champion pool and be like, oh, like who like the best champions and who's like playable in X role, and you're gonna be like, oh, that's kind of an open question, because a lot of champions are viable and variable in various rules. Like if you want to play top lane, like it's not like you could just pick like 1 of 5 champions. It's like you could pick Asante, you could pick Kled. If you want to play a ranged weird top, you could play like Lilia, you could play like Nasus, you could play Mordekaiser, you could play Nautilus, even though he's mainly a support. You could play Poppy top, but you can also play a jungle and support. There are like so many options that it kind of leads to like this shitty choice paralysis, and people needing to know what every single champion does, or like people needing to know what every single deck does, and people feeling like they kind of just get scammed sometimes because they're unfamiliar with a matchup. Like an easy example I could give is like, let's say like you're a very traditional top laner and all you really play are like, you know, like very basic top laners. Like you're playing like, I don't know, you play like Jack's top every single game. And then like you randomly go against our Rammus top who's just proxy farming in your base. Like, what are you as a player mainly supposed to do about that? Are you telling me you like prepared for the proxy farm angle? And like, I'm sorry, the answer is no. And that most people are just not really prepared to go against that. And the same can be said for Yu-Gi-Oh, where there's too much shit available, like too many decks that are legitimately competitively viable all at once. It can create a very frustrating experience for both competitive and casual players. I'm not saying that I dislike open formats. I like wide formats. I like formats where there are like 4, 5, 6 decks available. I don't like it when there's like 15 decks available. You know what I mean? I think that makes it just like a fucking coin toss. And although it's fun, it can be, I understand, it can be very fucking annoying for competitive players. And again, I like open formats. But that's just me. That's just my personal opinion. Let me know what your guys' thoughts on the card drama. Should every card be made meta viable? Should every deck be made meta playable? Who knows? Tell me what your favorite for fun deck is in the comment section down below. And I will see you guys in the next video.